The palace of Egesaland had been preparing since before sunrise. The great hall was being decorated with fresh flowers. The entrance was being cleaned for the third time, and the head housekeeper was giving instructions to every worker she could find. For the first time in 12 years, the crown prince was coming home to stay. The queen had personally chosen the flowers in his private bedroom. The king had personally inspected the wheelchair access ramps in the palace. Almost everyone in the household knew what today meant, but only 2 people in the kingdom truly felt the weight of it: the king and the queen themselves. Inside the royal chambers, Queen Ngozi sat alone with an old photograph in her hand. The picture showed a small boy laughing on a royal swing, with his mother holding his hand. That boy had left the palace at 15. Today, he would return as a 30-year-old man she barely recognized. Her husband, King Adekunle, entered quietly and stood beside her without saying a word. They both understood that a quiet wife often says more than a loud husband. He finally spoke, telling her the East Wing was ready and the convoy had landed 2 hours ago. Ngozi answered with the question only a mother could ask. Why had her own son not sent her a single message? The king reminded her gently that the young prince had at least typed the words, "Almost home, Mama," from the airport. Ngozi replied that she was not interested in sentences. She was interested in her son. Behind every royal gathering stands a mother's prayer, and behind every king's decision stands a queen's doubt. Today, both would meet under the same palace roof. 3 royal convoys had been approaching the palace since morning. Dust rose under golden wheels as they crossed the ancient Elisa Road. Princess Adesanya of Eze Kingdom stepped out first, graceful and soft-spoken, trained from birth for royal duty. Princess Folake of Oyo Kingdom followed, confident and commanding attention the moment she entered any room. Princess Amara of the Coastal Kingdom stepped out last, quiet and observant, hiding more curiosity than anyone suspected. The royal guests had finally arrived, but the man they had come to court did not yet know they were waiting. Upstairs in the palace, the head maid was busy training the junior staff on how to behave in front of foreign royalty. She reminded them that gossiping about the royal family was not a junior maid's right. "Worry at home, not in this palace," she warned them. The palace servants moved like a well-trained army that morning. Something important was returning to this kingdom, and they all wanted to play their part. In a small rented room in low-income Lagos, far away from the shine of Egesaland, Mama Ifeoma woke up coughing. Her daughter, Chidinma, knelt beside her with 1 spoon of pap and 1 slice of bread. Ifeoma asked what Chidinma had eaten that morning, and Chidinma answered that she had already eaten, which both of them knew was a lie. They had only 2 tablets of medicine left. They had been surviving for months like this. Then Ifeoma asked Chidinma to bring her the brown wooden box from under the bed. Inside it were old photographs and a yellowed handwritten letter. One of the photographs showed a 7-year-old boy standing with his mother at a palace garden party. Chidinma finally asked the question she had been holding for years: why her mother had stopped writing to the queen. Ifeoma explained that shame had kept her silent, not anger. She had once been Queen Ngozi's personal maid for 15 straight years, trusted to run an entire palace wing. Then sickness came and took everything from her, including her pride. She asked Chidinma to deliver the letter personally and ask the queen for one thing: not money, but work. Honest work. "Survival beats pride," she said, "when pride has no roof." Chidinma agreed. That morning, she would go to the palace. She had no idea that her life was about to change forever. Inside the royal throne hall, the king stood before the three princesses and their parents. The queen sat beside the empty chair reserved for the prince. He welcomed them warmly and thanked them for accepting the invitation. He explained that the activities ahead would not always be announced in advance. A future queen must adapt, lead, and stay calm when plans change without warning. He reminded them that his son was a respectful young man who had always been serious as a child and was now a serious adult. The kingdom would see what the king already knew. The meeting ended. No one at the table yet realized that the man they were preparing to welcome would arrive in a chair with wheels. Inside the royal convoy, somewhere outside the city gates, Crown Prince Obinna sat quietly in the back seat of a black Range Rover. Beside him, his childhood friend, Tunde Bakare, held a folded wheelchair blanket across his lap. Tunde had known for 2 weeks that the king had invited the 3 royal families, and Obinna had flown into quiet rage when he heard it. He told Tunde that a royal title doesn't tell him who a person really is. Tunde reminded him that was exactly why the families were invited. Then Obinna asked about the chair he would use. Tunde confirmed the medical reports had been written carefully, using words like limited movement rather than permanent damage. Obinna asked his friend one final question. Why are we doing this? Tunde answered honestly. Because the princesses came expecting a healthy prince and a wealthy one, and Obinna wanted to know who would still respect him when they thought the crown had lost its shine. Obinna replied that he was not stopping. Today, the test would begin. Outside the palace gates, Chidinma stood in a clean but simple dress, holding a white envelope. 2 guards studied her carefully and told her she could not enter without an appointment. She insisted she had to deliver the letter personally to the head maid. Then she said her mother's name, Ifeoma Okafor. The guards did not recognize the name. Mrs. Aduni, the head maid herself, stepped out at that moment. She studied Chidinma's face for a long time and finally said, "You look just like her." She asked how Ifeoma was doing. Chidinma answered honestly, "Worse." Mrs. Aduni's voice softened. She told Chidinma that her mother had not been just an employee. She had been family. The royal doctor would visit her home today, and Chidinma could begin work tomorrow as a junior staff member. Ifeoma had asked for work, not money, and Aduni said that sounded exactly like the woman she remembered. As Chidinma walked into the palace courtyard for the first time, she had no idea that history was quietly bringing her mother full circle. The palace was about to take care of her, and she was about to take care of the prince himself. The royal convoy had finally reached the great palace gates. Trumpets played softly. The royal family stood waiting at the entrance. The queen's hands were folded tight. The car door opened, and Tunde stepped out first. He unfolded the wheelchair. Obinna was helped into it slowly by the arm. He sat, adjusted his jacket, and looked up. He said one word, "Mother." Ngozi rushed forward, her hand trembling. Her first question was not about the kingdom or the throne. Her first question was, "What happened to my son?" Obinna asked her to let him explain everything inside. The king, unmoving, watched his injured son with eyes that already held 1,000 questions of his own. Ngozi asked if Obinna could feel anything in his legs. He answered that he could feel a little. 3 months. She repeated the words. 3 months and not one phone call. Ngozi reminded Obinna that she was his mother and she had every right to worry. Obinna apologized. The welcome ceremony was over in less than 5 minutes. The man the palace had prepared for had arrived, but not as anyone expected. The kingdom would need many days to understand what had just changed inside the walls of Ijesaland. In the private royal study, King Adekunle asked for the full story. Obinna explained everything: the accident outside the city, the months in a private hospital, the damaged nerves, the slow recovery. He admitted he had hidden the truth because he didn't want his mother to hear fear in his voice. Ngozi told him that she should have been holding his hand through the pain. Obinna promised she would never be hidden from again. Tunde stood at the door the entire time, accepting the blame the queen handed him without defending himself. Father and son finished the conversation with one shared understanding. The search for a wife could wait. The prince's healing could not. In a quiet sitting room down the hall, the 3 princesses were still processing what they had just witnessed. Folake paced the room and said she came expecting a healthy prince, not this. Adeze stayed silent. Amara stayed seated. Folake asked the question that had been on all of their minds. What if he never walks again? Adeze answered him carefully. Kings are measured by wisdom, not by their legs. Folake asked for time. Adeze told her to take all the time she needed, but if she left, she should leave honestly. None of the 3 princesses left that day. In a quiet corner of the palace garden, Amara and Adeze spoke honestly to each other for the first time. Amara admitted she could not stop thinking about the queen. Adeze felt sorry for the prince, too. They both agreed on one thing: never let another person's suffering become your personal inconvenience. They promised to wait until Obinna was ready to share his own story before they made any final judgment. Folake, meanwhile, had quietly questioned the head maid about his private medical records. The other 2 princesses decided Folake had crossed a line. Respect must come first. Questions can come later. In a quiet office inside the palace, Tunde read a private message from Folake. She wanted to meet with him alone. She had picked her words carefully, Tunde noticed. She did not use the word us, which meant she wanted access to the person who knew the prince best. Either she wanted the truth, or she suspected something about the deception. Tunde agreed to the meeting. He would answer no extra questions, only what the family had already announced publicly. Nothing more. The lie was beginning to feel pressure from every direction. The next day, the kitchen tested the princess's teamwork. Folake arrived 3 minutes late and began working faster than the others. The head chef told her quietly, "A kitchen is not a battlefield. Speed without accuracy is waste." Adeze folded patiently. Amara watched everything closely. In the middle of it all, Chidinma quietly wiped up a spill of flour without being asked. Nobody thanked her out loud, but Obinna, watching from the dining hall, noticed. He asked the staff member beside him why the new girl was different. The man answered simply, "She answers questions instead of offering opinions. That's why you noticed her." At the royal breakfast with the elder council, a junior maid tripped and spilled water directly on Folake's gown. Folake lost her composure in front of the entire gathering. Obinna's wheelchair wheel caught on a torn carpet edge. Nobody noticed until Chidinma stepped forward from the side, knelt quietly, freed the wheel, and stepped back into the line without saying a word. The prince looked at her longer than he looked at any of the princesses that morning. His friend Tunde teased him about it. Obinna answered only with one quiet sentence. Maybe. In the private sitting room that afternoon, the Queen debriefed the day's events. Aduni reported that Folake had lost control, but corrected herself. Adeze had restored calm by asking for solutions, not sympathy. Amara had reorganized the remaining service quietly. And one junior maid had freed the prince's wheelchair, without being asked and without looking for credit. The Queen said it plainly. A true sign of character is not perfect behavior, but honest behavior. That same evening, Folake walked up to the maid she had embarrassed and apologized properly. That single moment changed something in the palace. Holding a grudge is easy. Forgiving someone who once had power over you is not. Folake chose the harder path. In the West Garden, Obinna sat alone in his wheelchair. He confessed to Tunde that he hated the chair more than the deception itself. He had wanted to help during a real fire drill the night before. He had to wait for someone else to move him. The prince who once rescued others was now being rescued. Tunde asked him directly, "You worry too much about that maid." Obinna answered, "I am not yet sure what I feel." That night, in his private chamber, Obinna tried to stand up alone. He fell back into the chair. He tried again. His legs shook, but they held. He was beginning to wonder if the lie had gone further than he ever intended. Hours later, a real fire broke out in the palace kitchen because of old wiring. Staff evacuated. One cook, Bisi, was still inside the storage room. Chidinma ran against the tide of escaping servants, found Bisi coughing in the smoke, and led her out safely with calm instructions. When the king and queen arrived, smoke was already clearing. Every member of staff was safe. Only one young maid had stayed calm through the entire emergency. The queen asked for her name. The answer was Chidinma. She had only done what anyone should have done. That was exactly why she stood out so clearly. In the palace debrief that evening, the senior staff reviewed the day's events. Adeze carried other people's burdens too easily. Folake had surprised everyone by admitting her own weakness in public. Amara protected her heart too carefully, and some might mistake her for cold. But Obinna's eyes kept returning to one person, the maid who had never asked for attention. As the staff meeting ended, Aduni asked the queen a careful question. "What did the prince's eyes tell us today?" The queen answered with the wisdom of a mother. Character shows itself in ordinary moments. Obinna was learning what his mother had known all along. Late that night, in his private chamber, Obinna stared at his wheelchair like a man staring at his own prison. He asked himself the hardest question. When did I become afraid of my own plan? He tried again to stand on his own. His legs shook. They held. A soft knock came at the door. Chidinma had arrived with his evening medicine from Mrs. Aduni. She noticed he looked exhausted. He tried to hide it. She told him gently that hiding pain is not the same as healing. They spoke for a few minutes about mothers, healing, and trust. When she left, Obinna sat in the dark thinking about the one person in the palace who had never cared about his crown. The queen met with her advisors to plan the second test. Tomorrow's test would be harder. The princesses needed to be tested with real disappointment. A schedule change, a delay, a request that arrives without warning. A future queen who cannot handle disappointment will never handle a kingdom. Obinna would still attend, but he would not judge. In her private wing, Folake's mother spoke to her daughter. She said, "Mistakes are not failures. Mistakes are tuition." She told Folake to stop competing with Adesanya and become the woman she always said she was. Folake asked her mother if she still believed in her. Her mother answered honestly, "I believe you can become better. The choice is yours." In the garden courtyard the next morning, Adesanya and Amara spoke openly for the first time. Adesanya admitted she still felt guilty about how she had judged Obinna at first sight. Amara reminded her that recognizing the mistake herself was already growth. A royal messenger interrupted their conversation. The king requested the presence of all 3 princesses. Today would not be an ordinary day. "When has any day in this palace been ordinary?" Amara replied quietly. In the royal assembly hall, the king and queen stood before the 3 princesses and their parents. The king explained that for the past several days, the princesses had become part of life within this palace. They had shared meals, witnessed joy, witnessed difficulty. "Character," the king said, "cannot be borrowed. It cannot be bought. It cannot be worn like clothing. It reveals itself in ordinary moments." The prince's recovery was still uncertain. The royal council would visit tonight. There would be a brief ceremony. The choice of who would stand beside him at the council rested on how each princess conducted herself this very hour. That same evening, a sealed letter arrived on Obinna's desk. He opened it slowly. Tunde had to be summoned immediately. The letter had come from an outside medical team. The palace's own royal medical board had quietly requested a second independent examination. Tonight. If the examination happened tonight, the truth about his deception would come out. Obinna looked at Tunde with the eyes of a man who had just realized his own test had betrayed him. "Not yet," he whispered. "I am not ready for them to see the truth." Tunde warned him clearly. "You are going to lose everything for a maid." Obinna answered, "Not for a maid. For the only honest person in this palace." In the dark of his chamber, Obinna stood up from the wheelchair alone. He took one step, then another. His legs shook, but they held. At the main gate of the palace, a strange convoy had just arrived. Dr. Emeka stepped out and informed the guards that the second medical team had arrived faster than expected. The queen's face turned pale. Obinna's eyes widened. The doors of the royal study closed quietly. The day the prince faked his weakness to test the love of others was the day the palace itself began to test him.
Subscribe for more
End
videos.
of episode 1.
Turn on notifications.